Then, she disappeared, without a trace. This is no final answer.
In January of 2013, a 21-year-old student from Canada named Eliza Lam arrived in Los Angeles alone. She had planned the trip carefully. It was part of a longer journey down the West Coast, and she documented it the way many young travelers did at the time, through blog posts, photos, and daily check-ins with her family. She was known to be responsible, thoughtful, close with her parents. Every day, without fail, she contacted them to let them know where she was and how she was doing. When Eliza checked into the Cecil Hotel, nothing immediately seemed wrong. The building was old, worn, cheap. But it was centrally located, and for travelers on a budget, that mattered. What many didn't realize, or chose to ignore, was the hotel's reputation. Decades earlier, the Cecil had been linked to suicides, violent deaths, and long-term residents struggling with addiction and mental illness. By 2013, it was infamous. But Eliza didn't arrive frightened. She explored the city, visited bookstores, took photos, posted about her experiences. To the outside world, her trip looked normal, even happy. And that's what makes what happened next so disturbing. Because whatever went wrong did not begin with a scream. It began quietly, in a place full of people. The Cecil Hotel was not unusual at first glance. It stood in downtown Los Angeles, surrounded by busy streets, noise, and constant movement. To someone visiting for the first time, it looked like many older hotels in the area, tall, aging, and inexpensive. But the Cecil carried a reputation. Over the decades, it had been connected to numerous deaths, disappearances, and violent incidents. Some of them documented, others rumored. By the time Eliza Lam arrived, the hotel had already earned a grim place in Los Angeles history. None of that was obvious from the lobby. Guests checked in. Staff went about their shifts. Life continued as normal. Eliza was initially placed in a shared room with other travelers. Within days, those roommates complained about her behavior. Hotel staff later said she seemed distressed and erratic at times, and she was moved to a private room. No one thought much of it. People act strangely while traveling. Stress, jet lag, unfamiliar surroundings, all of it can affect behavior. Eliza continued exploring the city. She visited local attractions. She took photographs. She wrote online. But behind the routine, subtle changes were happening. Her posts became less frequent. Her tone shifted. Nothing alarming. Just different. The last confirmed sighting of Eliza Lam occurred on January 31, 2013, inside the Cecil Hotel. She stepped into an elevator. And for reasons that are still debated, she never left the building alive. What happened inside that elevator would soon become one of the most analyzed pieces of surveillance footage in internet history. And it would raise questions no one has been able to answer completely. The video was recorded on January 31, 2013. It came from a security camera inside one of the Cecil Hotel's elevators. Black and white. No sound. A wide, slightly distorted angle that made the space feel smaller than it was. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The elevator doors opened, and Eliza stepped inside. She wore a red hoodie and dark shorts. She appeared calm, unhurried. Then she pressed several buttons on the control panel. Not just one floor. Several. She leaned forward, as if expecting the doors to close. They didn't. Seconds passed. She stepped out of the elevator, leaning to the side, peering down the hallway. Her movements were cautious, measured, as though she was checking whether someone was nearby. She stepped back inside, then out again. She pressed more buttons. At one point, she stood in the doorway, her body half hidden, her head turning slowly from side to side. Her posture suggested alertness. Not panic. Not confusion. Awareness. Her hands began to move in a strange, deliberate way. Fingers spreading, folding, gesturing in the empty air, as if responding to something just outside the camera's view. No one else appeared. The hallway remained empty. Eventually, Eliza stepped fully out of the elevator and walked away. The doors closed. That was the last time she was ever seen on camera. When the lab released the footage weeks later, they hoped someone might recognize her movements or recall seeing her that night. Instead, the internet took over. Millions of people watched the clip, slowed it down, zoomed in, debated every gesture. Some believed she was frightened. Others believed she was confused. Some insisted she was reacting to a presence the camera could not capture. The footage offered no answers, only questions. And the more people watched it, the more unsettling it became. After the night of January 31st, Eliza Lam vanished. No one reported hearing a struggle. No security alarms were triggered. No hotel staff recalled seeing anything unusual. At first, there was no immediate concern. Guests check out late. Travel plans change. People come and go. But Eliza had a routine. Every day, she contacted her parents. Short messages, phone calls, updates about where she had been and where she planned to go next. This time, the messages never came. When her parents couldn't reach her, they contacted the Los Angeles Police Department. Within hours, a missing person report was filed. The search began inside the Cecil Hotel. Police questioned staff, reviewed security footage, checked common areas, stairwells, and exits. Nothing. They expanded the search to the surrounding neighborhood. Flyers were posted. Patrols canvassed nearby streets. Guests were asked if they had seen her. No one had. Days passed. Eliza's belongings were still in her room. Her phone. Her clothing. Her personal items. Nothing suggested she had planned to leave. The hotel itself was searched multiple times, including the rooftop. Officers reported that the doors were locked. Alarms were silent. There were no signs anyone had accessed restricted areas. As the days stretched on, concern turned into confusion. Then fear. Because people don't usually disappear from a populated building without leaving a trace. And yet, Eliza Lam had. The elevator footage was released to the public as a last resort, a hope that someone, somewhere, might recognize her or remember crossing paths with her that night. Instead, it raised even more questions. Where did she go after leaving the elevator? And how could she vanish so completely inside a hotel full of people? Nearly 3 weeks after Eliza Lam was last seen, guests at the Cecil Hotel began to complain. The water pressure was low. Some said the water coming from their taps was dark. Others described it as having an unusual taste. At first, staff assumed it was a plumbing issue, an inconvenience, but nothing more. A maintenance worker was sent to the rooftop to inspect the hotel's water tanks. There were 4 large tanks positioned high above the building. They supplied water to the entire hotel. When the worker climbed the ladder and opened one of the tanks, he saw something floating inside. It was Eliza Lam. Her body was submerged in the water. The tank was sealed from the outside. There were no signs of forced entry. No visible damage to the lid. No indication that anyone else had been there. The discovery stunned investigators. Access to the rooftop required passing through locked doors. The alarm system, according to hotel staff, had not been triggered. Yet somehow, Eliza had ended up inside a water tank nearly impossible to reach without assistance. The hotel was evacuated. Guests were informed. The water system was shut down. News of the discovery spread rapidly. When the public learned where Eliza had been found, shock turned into disbelief. How did she get there? Why that location? And if the tank was sealed, how could she have entered it alone? The questions only multiplied. And the answers, once again, refused to appear. The autopsy was conducted by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. The findings were both revealing and frustrating. There were no signs of physical trauma. No broken bones. No defensive wounds. No evidence of sexual assault. Eliza's cause of death was ruled accidental drowning. The report noted that she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and had been prescribed several medications. Toxicology results showed that the levels of these medications in her system were inconsistent, some were lower than expected, others were absent. Investigators suggested that she may have stopped taking them regularly. This explanation offered a possible framework for her behavior in the elevator. Disorientation. Impulsivity. Episodes of paranoia. But it did not explain everything. There were still no clear answers as to how she accessed the rooftop. The water tank lid was later clarified to be found open, contradicting early reports that it was sealed. However, even with this correction, the physical challenge remained. The tanks were tall. The ladder was difficult to climb. And there was no easy way to reach the top alone. Despite these concerns, officials concluded there was no evidence of foul play. The case was closed. For law enforcement, the explanation was sufficient. For the public, it wasn't. Because explanations that rely on possibility rather than proof tend to leave gaps. And gaps invite speculation. The more details emerged, the more people questioned whether the full story had been told. Was Eliza experiencing a mental health crisis? Or was something else happening that night? The official conclusion ended the investigation. But it did not end the mystery. Once the elevator footage was released, the case stopped being local. It became global. Millions of people watched the video. Forums filled with theories. Entire communities formed around analyzing every second of footage. Viewers slowed the video frame by frame. They noticed her gestures. Her pauses. The way she seemed to react to something unseen. Some believed she was hiding from a real person. Others suggested she was experiencing hallucinations. A few went further, proposing paranormal explanations tied to the Cecil Hotel's history. The building itself became part of the mystery. Its past was revisited. Every death. Every rumor. Online investigators mapped the hotel layout. Studied rooftop access. Calculated distances and angles. Some even traveled to the Cecil themselves. Music videos were compared. Conspiracy patterns were drawn. Coincidences were treated as clues. But as interest grew, so did misinformation. Edited versions of the elevator footage circulated. Some altered the timing. Others cropped out key moments. This distorted public perception and fueled confusion. Meanwhile, Eliza's family watched from a distance. For them, this wasn't a puzzle. It was personal. They asked for respect. For privacy. For restraint. But the internet rarely stops once it starts. The case became less about answers and more about interpretation. And the more theories emerged, the harder it became to separate fact from fiction. In the end, the internet didn't solve the mystery. It multiplied it. As time passed, attention shifted away from theories and back toward the details. And the details didn't always agree. Early reports stated that the water tank lid was closed and sealed. Later, officials clarified that it was actually found open. That correction mattered. But it also raised questions about how misinformation had spread so quickly, even in official statements. Then there was the rooftop access. Police initially claimed the rooftop door was locked and alarmed. Later, it was acknowledged that the alarm may not have been functioning properly at the time. Again, not impossible. But not certain. There were also discrepancies surrounding the elevator itself. Some viewers noticed the doors appeared to stay open unusually long. Investigators later explained that the elevator may have been placed in hold mode when multiple buttons were pressed. A technical explanation. reasonable, but unsatisfying to those searching for something concrete. Then there were the timelines. Eliza was last seen on January 31st. Her body was found on February 19th. For weeks, she remained undiscovered, despite multiple searches of the building. The idea that she could have been there the entire time disturbed many. Each clarification closed one door but opened another. Nothing directly contradicted the official conclusion. Yet nothing fully reinforced it either. The case existed in a grey area. Not criminal. Not fully accidental. Just unresolved. And in cases like that, doubt tends to linger longer than certainty. As the discussion continued, many experts urged the public to look at the case through a different lens. Mental health. Eliza Lamb had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a condition that can involve periods of extreme mood shifts, impulsive behavior, and distorted perception, especially when medication is interrupted or taken inconsistently. Doctors explained that during certain episodes, individuals may experience heightened paranoia, confusion, or a sense of being watched. Not imagined monsters, but intense, convincing fear. This perspective offered a possible explanation for the elevator footage. Her movements could reflect agitation. Her gestures, internal dialogue. Her hesitation, uncertainty rather than threat. From this view, the night didn't involve danger from someone else, but danger from within. Still, many struggled to accept this explanation completely. Because understanding a condition does not mean understanding a decision. Why climb to the roof? Why enter a water tank? Why remove clothing, as reported later? Mental health explained parts of the story, but not the entire sequence. Others warned against turning a real person's death into entertainment. They reminded viewers that behind every theory was a young woman who had been trying to live her life. Not a symbol. Not a mystery. Just human. The case forced an uncomfortable realization. Sometimes, tragedy doesn't come with a clear villain. Sometimes, it comes quietly, through confusion, vulnerability, and circumstance. And those are the hardest stories to accept. More than a decade has passed since Eliza Lamb's death. The hotel has changed names. The building has been renovated. Life in downtown Los Angeles has moved on. But the questions remain. Officially, the case is closed. No crime. No suspect. No evidence of foul play. An accident shaped by circumstance and mental health. And yet, the footage still circulates. People still pause on her gestures. Still analyze her movements. Still wonder what she was seeing or feeling in those final moments. The truth is, there is no single detail that proves another explanation. But there is also no moment where everything fully makes sense. And that space between explanation and certainty is where the case continues to live. Not as a conspiracy, but as a reminder that human perception is fragile. That fear does not need a source to feel real. And that some stories resist closure, no matter how much we want it. Eliza Lamb was not a mystery while she was alive. She was a traveler. A student. A daughter. The mystery came after. And perhaps that's why it endures. Because this isn't a story with a final twist. It's a story with a final silence. What do you think happened? Was it a tragic accident shaped by mental health? Or are there pieces we still don't see? There is no final answer.